the Dementia Researcher Podcast, talking careers, research, conference highlights, and so much more.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Dementia Researcher Podcast. Today we'll be revisiting a topic that hasn't been discussed on this show for quite some time, and it's the PhD Viva. I'm Dr Leah Fullegar and I'm a research associate at the University of Portsmouth. I defended my PhD way back in 2023. I really enjoyed my Viva, but when I had a conversation with my friend at the time, and she was absolutely traumatized by hers. When I said that I was doing this podcast today, she just said, "Why on earth would you do that? That's just reliving trauma." So she won't be listening, I don't think. But I'm excited to reflect because I had a really lovely experience, and I want everyone to know that you can have a lovely experience. As ever, I'm joined by a brilliant panel of guests who have all themselves recently defended and gone through the Viva. In this show, we're going to learn a little bit more about their experiences, how they prepared, what they wish they'd done differently, what helped, what didn't. And hopefully by the end of the show, we will have provided a few tips and some funny anecdotes potentially that might help you when the time comes. So joining me today, we have Dr Hannah Hussain and Dr Aisling Flynn and new doctor Shalom Henderson. Before we get into it, I'd love to hear a little bit about your research and each of you and what you're working on at the moment. So first, if I pass over to Dr Aisling Flynn, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your research?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Aisling Flynn. I am a PhD, actually not a PhD student or researcher anymore. It's force of habit. Perfect example of what happens post-PhD. I am a lecturer in occupational therapy in Bournemouth University, and I defended my PhD earlier this year in May, so not that long ago. And actually I had a really, really lovely Viva experience, which was quite unexpected. So I'm looking forward to sharing that. My research is very much focused on dementia and digital technology. So my PhD was focused on the design of a virtual reality application for people living with dementia in order to promote their social connectedness.
Fantastic. That was a proper, still a PhD student. Haven't quite got past that feeling yet. And Dr. Shalom, can you tell me a bit about what you're doing, where you're working, what your research is about?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Shalom Henderson. I go by my nickname Shaz. And I am a newly minted PhD because I had my Viva 2 weeks ago. I am at the University of Cambridge. I'm also a speech-language pathologist by background. So I've been working with patients with frontotemporal lobar degeneration and related disorders like Alzheimer's disease in the last 7 years. My research has been largely focused on two broad aims. Firstly, to address the barriers to the assessment of progressive aphasias, and secondly, to improve clinical characterization of Alzheimer's disease phenotypes, really considering its full clinical spectrum, including disease severity. I'm really excited to be in this podcast today, and also, my time as a PhD student is coming to an end, and I look forward to the conversations.
Brilliant. It's really good to see speech and language therapy, occupational therapy being represented. That's just my little excited in the background. Next, Dr. Hannah Hussain. Can you tell me a bit about you and your research?
Yeah, sure. My name's Hannah Hussain. I'm really excited to be here today and on this podcast call. So my research is, I'm a health economist by background and a pharmacist, so I've kind of got the clinical experience as well. But my research was looking at measuring health-related quality of life in dementia populations, specifically for use in economic evaluations. I focused on the challenges related to self and proxy assessment and worked on a methodology that would enable us to integrate both self-reports and proxy reports in a kind of robust manner, acknowledging that both sources of report are really informative and important, and could provide a more accurate reflection of health-related quality of life in economic evaluations and help us to prove that some wonderful interventions are cost-effective. So yeah, that's a bit about me and my PhD. I'm currently working as an economist at the OHE, the Office of Health Economics in London, and my Viva was in June, so not that long ago, but it feels like so long ago now.
Fantastic. I'm really pleased that we've got a pharmacist here as well. I love the idea of being a pharmacist. I think in another life I would be a pharmacist. Thinking about like preparation stuff, I when I was preparing for my Viva, I had absolutely no idea where to start, and I was kind of jumping around all over the place trying to think what I need to do to prepare. So I suppose the first question I would have to ask is there any one thing you did to prepare that really helped you before the Viva? Shaz, if we start with you.
Sure, yes. I know that the podcast listeners won't be able to see, but I have my softbound copy here for you guys to see. I printed this copy, and as you'll see, it's color-coded. It has Post-it notes, and I found it really helpful to mark areas that I found to be important, beginning of chapters or abstracts, important figures, or places where I knew that the examiners might ask questions about methodological concerns or details. So reading through my thesis, of course, was important, but marking it with notes I found to be really incredibly helpful. My supervisors gave me a lot of helpful comments and suggestions as well. Just to mention a few, they really reminded me that the examiners most likely would have read my thesis once, so it's a huge memory load for them. So it's okay to walk them through a concept or a theory aspect or a figure. So I actually prepared a brief summary of each chapters, as well as kind of rehearse, not like a script, but rehearse how I would walk someone through a complicated figure.
That's really interesting, because one of the pieces of advice one of my supervisors gave me was about having a script that you could sort of fall back on when there was something if someone asked you a difficult question or you just needed time to think. Hannah, was your experience sort of similar? Did you do the Post-it notes and everything with your thesis?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say the exact same thing, having a printed copy of your thesis, because I think one of the things that you might neglect or not realize is you can take what you want in there with you. So it's your work, and that's okay. You're not cheating by taking your own thesis into a Viva. So I did the exact same thing, and my copy's under my laptop stand, so I'm not going to whip it out, but I had the exact same as you with the Post-its and the color coding and everything else. The other thing that really helped me in my preparation was I had a mock Viva, and actually I was really lucky because my supervisors arranged this with other people within the faculty, so it felt a little bit more real that they weren't my actual supervisors that I spoke to every day for 3 years. They kind of fielded loads of questions to them to ask to me to make it feel a little bit more like an actual Viva, and I had that 2 weeks before the Viva, so it kind of like the initial nerves were gone. I was actually more nervous for my mock, and I felt like that was a really good experience and a really good thing to do, and I would definitely recommend that to everyone else if they can access that.
That's really interesting, because one of my later questions I'll ask momentarily was about nerves, and it's interesting that kind of helped manage those nerves and delay them a bit, I suppose, or not delay them, replace them.
Yeah.
Aisling, how did you find preparation? Was there anything you particularly did?
Yeah, similar to the others, I very much I would have scribbled all over that printed out thesis and had the margins filled with kind of different things that I wanted to touch on within the Viva. Also, I found it really useful to have like an overview of each chapter. So I did like a bullet pointed list of the main points within each chapter and had that put in at the front of each chapter then with a paper clip, so I could refer to that during the Viva. I also, like that, had 2 mock Vivas, which I thought were invaluable actually in terms of settling those nerves and just practicing saying your questions out loud. I guess something that hasn't been touched on, I bought a pack of Viva cards, they're called, which have loads of like common questions that come up in the Viva around tell me about the aims of your research, what is a contribution to knowledge, so all those kind of common questions that come up, and I would just pull a card from the deck and then say it out loud, or get a family member to pick a card and then I had to answer it. So that like constant repetition, and I thought that was really, really helpful for me as well.
Yeah, that's kind of like building a muscle memory for question answers as well, isn't it? Like just having someone throw questions at you while you're cooking of an evening. What are the main aims of your research? And being able to spew something out on command. And on nerves, on the day of, were you feeling nervous? Were you feeling confident? Aisling, I'll stick with you for a minute. How were you feeling on the morning?
The morning of, I was quite nervous actually. I couldn't eat at all. I was really, really nervous before I went in. And actually, the second that I went in there and started talking and was introduced to the panel, my nerves kind of just dissipated, to be honest. And you get into kind of a sense of flow in terms of just answering the questions, and the time actually flew. So I think once I was in there and stepped inside the room, those nerves just went, thankfully.
That's a good thing about I was really lucky that my Viva was in the morning, so I didn't have much time to have the nerves build up. And it's just a quick question: did you all have morning Vivas?
Yeah.
No, Shalom, was yours later in the day?
Mine was at 2 p.m.
Right.
Do you think that like impacted how you felt on the day?
I think so. I'm more of a morning person. So my Viva was also 3 hours long. It was, at some point I felt fatigued from cognitive overload. So I think it did impact how I did on my Viva overall in terms of just energy and having consistent enthusiasm during the discussions. But in terms of nerds, I have a lot of friends. I'm very grateful to have a lot of friends who have gone through this process already. And one of my dearest and closest friends, Dr. Sonneson, just to give her a shout out, she gave me really good advice a couple of days before my Viva. She said that it's good to be reminded that in addition to your supervisory team, there are most likely only 2 people who will devote so much time and dedication and attention to your research work, and they're your examiners. And that really instilled in me that this is such a privilege that these 2 people are going out of their way, making time to read it, comment, and give constructive feedback. So, I think what that did to me was put me at ease, and I felt really grateful on the day of. I was able to have lunch with my colleagues before the Viva, and I think I went in there not only grateful but also confident, knowing that this is my work. I'm the expert in my own work. So those 2 feelings I think really stayed throughout my Viva.
That's really lovely to hear, and I think that's a common theme a lot of the time in people when they're talking about their Vivas, is like the sense of ownership and knowing like this is your work and you're the expert in that as the conversation goes on. Hannah, how did you find your nerves and everything on the day?
Yeah, so I was really nervous going in, and although the nerves did settle, they kind of like peaked and troughed throughout the Viva. Mine was also really long, 2.5 hours. And I think that the thing that was making me more nervous as I was going was that my examiners weren't really letting on whether or not I was answering their question. So they'd ask me a question, I'd be like, yeah, okay, and then does that answer your question? Like, is that what you were looking for? And then they'd just be like, yes, very stone faced. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm doing this right or not. We had a comfort break in the middle because it was so long. And then my examiners said that, this kind of standard thing, we need to have a discussion, then we'll come back to you and we'll let you know, we'll come grab you. I went to wait in my supervisor's office, and they said, not longer than 10 minutes. 10 minutes went by, another 10 minutes went by, another 10 minutes went by, and I was absolutely the most nervous wreck ever, especially because my supervisor was Googling, like, what's the difference between minor and major corrections? And I was like, which was really tough. But in the end, my internal and external examiner were just trying to get their notes written up whilst they were together in person on the day, and they'd made their decision pretty soon, which was fine. But yeah, that really added to the nerves. I think it's just one of those days. It's a big thing. Like, it's the end of like, you've dedicated so much time and effort and energy to this piece of work where you've led the entire project. For me, it was 3.5 years. Like, that is going to be a nerve-wracking experience. I don't think it would be normal for it not to be. But if you're prepared and you know your stuff, you can just keep telling yourself that you're doing your best and no one else can do this better than you. So yeah, it was nerve-wracking, but it was rewarding too.
Thing I picked up on what you were just saying is about how when you're going into the Viva and it's the end of this sort of massive journey of research that you've been heavily involved in for God knows how long, depending on all the things that happen throughout. And one of the things I found, and I know this probably goes slightly beyond preparing for your Viva, was that actually how much it didn't feel like the end. So I had modest corrections, which was a bit more than minor. And it felt, I came out of that Viva feeling really like, so it's not over. I don't know if anyone else had a similar experience.
Like, absolutely, I had the same feeling, mainly because, I don't know, it must vary between academic institutions, but there was just so much admin for me after as well. Like, we have to make our theses accessible on the White Rose repository. So that was like further admin, and I was trying to submit a paper at the same time and get that tied off. And, it didn't finish when it finished. It was a relief and you could breathe, but you knew there was still more to come. So yeah, that feeling resonates with me.
Shaz and Aisling, you're both nodding.
Yeah, I think that PhD is a process and the end is unclear. I felt that the submission itself was very anticlimactic. So I was really writing up for 3 months intensively, and then I submitted, and it was just a click of a button. I got an email that said, "Thank you for completing your assignment." And it reminded me of being in primary school. Whereas, I've spent 4 years of my time really working on various projects to make it a thesis that I'm quite proud of. So the thesis submission, I think, was a bit more anticlimactic than the Viva. So after the Viva, I felt more like, okay, this is the end. I just have to do some minor corrections and then it'll be it. I think in my case, because I'm moving back to the US, there is a concrete next step. So maybe that's why it kind of feels like I'm done at this moment. But I do, that feeling definitely resonates with me as well.
Yeah, I would say similar. I had minor corrections, but actually, when I went to look at it at the time, it still takes quite a bit of time to sit down and do that. But also at the point where you have your Viva and then you're doing those corrections, oftentimes you're in full time work and you're doing it on an afternoon or whenever you get time in the evening. So you don't have that protected time that you had during your PhD to actually sit down and do that. So it's actually trying to fit that time in within the time frame that you're given as well. And yeah, I agree with Hannah that admin, it does take up quite a bit of time in order to get things uploaded on repositories or put an embargo if something is being published and you want to publish it open access. So there's quite a lot of kind of admin and hoops to jump through, I guess.
One thing that my husband was very pleased about with all of the anticlimactic finishes that weren't really finishes. It was like, well, there's just so many opportunities to celebrate. We can celebrate after the Viva. We can celebrate when the final thesis is submitted. We can celebrate at the graduation. All those opportunities. He's an optimist.
I love that though.
I'm jumping back a bit to the actual Viva and that. One of the things I was really conscious of was what to wear. And my Viva was online, and I was very conscious that I had to look professional and smart and things like that. And as you can probably tell, I think I'm the scruffiest person here, so it's an effort for me to look professional. Did you guys feel the same? Did you sort of panic about what to wear and how to present yourself?
I definitely did. I was thought quite a bit about it, actually. I think it was mainly because I was procrastinating over actually doing Viva related prep. It was something I thought quite a lot about. And I remember having a conversation with my supervisor asking what to wear and getting her advice. And she actually laughed back at me and just said, whatever you are comfortable in, because it's your Viva, obviously within reason. But the main thing is that you're comfortable on the day. Ideally wear layers. So if the room is too warm, you can take your cardigan off, or you can put the cardigan on. So it's just to I guess, have those layers if you need them. Mine was during, as I said, May, so a little bit unpredictable in terms of what the weather can do, particularly in Ireland. But yeah, I think comfort is key, really. I just ended up going with like smart trousers and a kind of long sleeved top. So again, just something quite casual, really. Smart casual, I would say.
I was exactly the same, smart casual. I get cold very easily, and the weather is, like you say, very unpredictable. And mine was in November, and sometimes the heater is on, sometimes it's not. So I had a long sleeve, some just dress pants that I would wear to work or to when working with patients. And I also had a blazer that was easy to take off. So I ended up taking it off when it did get a little warm.
Yeah, pretty much the same for me. A blazer and some pants and a shirt underneath. I think that, yeah, I agree. It was, you want to go smart casual, but when you've been remotely doing your PhD, like how I did, and started in COVID, you were used to the sweatpants life. So I was like, I'm not gonna sit with a non-elasticated waistband for 2.5 hours and be thinking about that the entire time. So yeah, it was like definitely smart casual, but yeah, I agree. Layers and things. It's important to be comfortable.
There's a question that I hadn't actually considered until I saw it on one of the things to talk about in this podcast today. And it's how do you feel about being an examiner? Are you looking forward to being an examiner for someone else's PhD and someone else's Viva? I hadn't even thought about that really. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I haven't really thought about it, but I would definitely like to in the future, hopefully one day. I think it is an honor because it means that you are somewhat of an expert in someone's field, and they're also trusting you. The institute, as well as the supervisors, are trusting you to do a fair job in really giving constructive feedback, as well as suggestions and comments to the student, and make the decision of whether that person passes. So I think there's weight that comes with it, but it's also a huge honor and a privilege. So I would like to one day, but I'm just fresh out of a PhD, so I think I have a long ways to go before that happens.
Yeah, I think it's something that once you've done your Viva, it's something that I guess I haven't even thought about because I still feel like a student, clearly from the beginning when I introduced myself as one. But yeah, I think in terms of my Viva experience was not what I imagined whatsoever. It was really, really lovely, and I never thought that I actually would have had that experience. Even though everyone reassures you, I still thought that I was going to go in there and get absolutely grilled, which wasn't the case. I had just two really lovely examiners, and I think that experience has shown me how I would like to be as an examiner, in terms of putting somebody at ease and not having that power imbalance, actually, which is really important. That my examiners really just saw me as a researcher, and saw the merit in my work, which was really lovely. So I think that's something that that I'll definitely take with me if I do have the privilege of being an examiner down the line.
It's a lovely way to think of it, especially I agree with you. My Viva experience was really lovely and supportive, and I would like to take that forward if I was ever to be an examiner for someone else. Hannah, how do you feel about it?
I think it's a little bit of a weird one for me because I've kind of left academia. The role that I'm in is kind of half academic, half consulting. So nothing that I'm doing is strictly academic. I still have my foot in that door and have submitted some like grants for funded research and stuff because I like the research side of things. But I'm trying to put myself back into an academic mind space and think about how I would deal with it. But it just feels really weird, like not being affiliated with like a university or an institution. I think I would find it really valuable, especially if it was a topic that aligned with my research and my research interests, particularly in dementia research and health economics. It's a really interesting field and there's so many loose ends. So to be able to see a new researcher come through with some like budding ideas, I think it would be really valuable. I do wonder how they get through the whole PhD thesis and how I would do it. Would I read it in chunks? Would I read it in one go? I do wonder how I would do that. But yeah, I think I would definitely be up for it if someone nominated me as their examiner.
We should totally like get another podcast panel together of examiners and talk about how they do it. Like one of my colleagues was saying that she'd set a day aside to read a thesis, and I was just, that's a lot of concentration in it to read it all in one day. I don't know if I could do that. Is there anything you wish had been different about your Viva? And that can sometimes be a little bit of a difficult thing to talk about, I think, because I can't really articulate why, but I think it can be a little bit different. And I think in my Viva, I wish I'd been a little bit more confident and a bit more sort of confident in myself in the outcome at the time. Shaz, as the most recent, I'll see if do you feel like you could have done anything differently?
Yeah, I think in terms of preparation, I like to be organized, and I have a type A personality. So I think that I really planned ahead leading up to the Viva. But even with that, it was crunch time and it was very stressful. I also have a toddler at home. So there were a lot of unforeseen circumstances like illnesses, and I had to stay home certain days where I thought I would be working. So if I could go back, I think I would give myself a bit more time to write up. Initially I thought 3 months would be great, but maybe 4 months or 5 months, so that I wouldn't be working over weekends or working late at night. But in terms of the Viva and on the day, because my Viva was 3 hours long, my internal examiner actually suggested doing a little break. And I used that break to run to the toilet, and I came right back. But in hindsight, I think it would have been really nice to actually stretch, go for a cup of tea, and maybe a 5-minute walk to just get some fresh air. Because as I mentioned previously, it was very cognitively taxing. So I think having a break, or having some tea as you're thinking, it's quite helpful.
Yeah, just doing something a bit different to sort of put a break in it, I suppose, and stop thinking about it for 10-15 minutes was probably quite a nice relaxing thing to do. Hannah, is there anything you wish had been different or done differently about your Viva?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I enjoyed the Viva. It was tough but fair. My examiners were amazing, and I went for lunch with them straight after. It was a really rewarding experience. But the one thing that I didn't do was give myself enough time off after it. So, like Shah said, it's so cognitively draining. You actually don't realize until you get out of it how burnt out you are. Like, I was just so tired, and then had a job interview the next day, and then flew out to meet my in-laws for the first time 2 days later, and had one day to pack, and then came back and like it's basically started my job. So I just didn't give myself any time to just kind of simmer in the reality that I'd just done a Viva, and it's like a massive achievement. So I wish I'd done that. I wish I could go back and give myself a little bit more time to just decompress and do nothing and just enjoy doing nothing for a bit. But yeah, I would just advise that to people going forward.
Don't organise all of the most stressful things in your life to happen all within a few days of each other.
Exactly.
Yeah, that really sounds like a really exhausting week.
Mm-hmm.
Aisling, is there anything you would add to that, or anything
Yeah,
you would do differently?
I absolutely agree with Hannah in terms of giving yourself that time, which I don't think I fully did either. I celebrated the night of my Viva, but actually after that, you just go back into work, and you actually forget that even happened, which is it's a really strange feeling. But actually, for the Viva itself, while mine was actually a really positive experience. It only lasted about an hour and 20 minutes, so it was really quick. So I was really fortunate with that. But my external examiner was online, and my internal was in the room, so we had kind of a hybrid approach. And while it actually did work well, I think it would have been really nice to have that experience and actually meet that external examiner, because she was somebody that I really looked up to in terms of her research and her work. But just in terms of, she's based in Australia, so it just wasn't feasible. So I think if I was to do anything differently, it would be to have all of us in the room physically present, because I think you get a lot more from the conversation when everyone is there face to face.
I feel the same. I think having that face-to-face interaction and makes it feel a bit more real and a bit better, I think. And I'll make this my last sort of official question, but one of the tips that I was given before my Viva, I suppose, was that when you're going into the Viva, you're not going into it as a student, you're going into it as a colleague and as a fellow researcher. And that actually really changed how I felt about it going in, because I didn't feel like I was a student trying to prove something or pass an exam. I felt like I was going in as a researcher to talk about my research. Is there any one thing that anyone said to you before your Viva or since your Viva even that sort of really helped how you think about it?
I think for me, my supervisor, before I went into my Viva, basically just reiterated the fact that I had pretty much every chapter in my thesis published, and the fact that that had been already peer reviewed, and there was very little that my examiners could dispute, because that work had been published in kind of international peer reviewed journals that had a decent kind of impact factor. So I think that was definitely something that helped, knowing that that those papers had already gone through that process, and it was something that you could discuss within the Viva. But also, I worked really closely with the public and patient involvement group throughout my research, and they were really great in just telling me basically how great my research was when I didn't think it was great, and telling me that my Viva would be fine and that I will get through it. And I think having their perspective was actually really lovely and really reassuring going into my Viva as well.
Having your own little cheerleader squad sort of
When I
cheering you
really
on.
needed it and hated the thesis, and I couldn't even bring myself to open it. So I think, having that support was really lovely, actually.
Excellent. Shaz, is there anything?
I think I had 3 consistent advice from multiple people: my supervisors, mentors, colleagues, friends. Uh, the first thing was just be yourself. And at the time I said, oh, what do they mean? Just be myself. But I really was myself, and I was able to engage in conversations like colleagues, which is really good. The second thing was, I forgot, but the third thing was, don't be afraid to ask questions or to have disagreements. And I think that was really helpful to hear, because initially I thought of the Viva as like an exam, or, maybe you're being tested, but actually it's not. I had a lovely experience with both of my examiners. They treated me with so much respect as a colleague, a potential collaborator. And there were moments where I asked the question out of genuine interest, or there were times where I didn't quite understand, and I wasn't afraid to ask them for clarification. And I think that kind of back and forth really created a safe space where I felt that my opinion and my knowledge were valued, and that we could interact and exchange ideas collaboratively. So it was an overall very positive experience, as well as good advice from other people.
I kind of had one standout piece of advice that was given to me, or kind of a compliment that was given to me following my confirmation review, which is like your first year Viva, that I always carried forward and really helped me when it came to my Viva, which was that a strong researcher is one that admits their limitations and kind of can say when they don't know. So my primary supervisor, he just said to me, like, you're really good at just saying you don't know, and that's okay. You don't waffle. If you don't know the answer, like, you're not perfect. There's going to be things you don't know, so just say that. And it comes across so much better than trying to blag it or trying to say that you've considered something when you've not. There are limitations to everyone's research. As long as you're transparent and you acknowledge them, and we do at the end of every single chapter, it's okay to say that, and reiterate that in the way that you talk and defend your work. So yeah,
I think that's a really important thing to remember, because there's often this pressure to always have an answer and always have something to say, and being able to say I don't know is quite a brave and an important skill to have. Okay, so we're almost out of time, and I will do one final question just for fun. And I haven't thought about this at all, so I don't know what my answer would be, so I'm going to let you all answer first. If your PhD Viva had a theme song, what do you think it would be, and why? I'm looking at some very blank faces for a minute, so I'm going to pick on someone. Aisling.
How did I know you were this really threw me, this question, and I could not think of something, and then eventually something came to me before we started the podcast, actually. I don't usually listen to Bob Marley, but I think Bob Marley, Three Little Birds, every little thing's going to be all right, don't worry about a thing. I actually think that song will probably be the theme tune to my Viva.
That's really lovely, actually, that one. Hannah, you've spoken next, so I'm putting you on the spot next.
The first song that came to mind was Daniel Bedingfield, Gotta Get Through This. Because I was sat there for 2.5 hours, like, with the clock directly above my examiner's, like, just need to get through. As long as I get through, I'll be fine. So yeah, it would have to be that song. I'm sorry, but it has to be.
That's a perfect song for a Viva theme tune, I think. Shaz, what would yours be?
This is a really hard question. And just reflecting on my PhD, I had a baby in my second year. So a lot of my PhD has been finishing as well as trying to survive first-time motherhood. And my son really loves Moana. And there's a song, How Far I'll Go. And I think it really speaks to me because it's finding your way around the world, and it speaks to you being strong and being independent. And there's a lot of uncertainty in academia and what my future will look like. While I'm being optimistic, I think this song would be my choice.
I still don't have one. I don't know. I can't think of a song that would be a theme tune for my Viva. It would probably be something dark and moody because I was just so stressed about it. So I'll leave that open. I'll keep thinking about it. Maybe get Adam to add it in later if I can think of something. So I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. If you just can't get enough of this topic, then I'd say visit the Dementia Researcher website. You'll find a full transcript. You'll find our biographies on our guests, blogs, and so much more information. There's so much you can find out about preparing for your Viva. I'd also recommend taking a look at the Dementia Researcher Community app, which you'll find in the app stores or through the website, because there you find this amazing free course called Viva Success, Mastering Your PhD Defence. And it brings together all the blogs, all the webinars, tools, guidance and resources from the Dementia Researcher website, and structures it in a way that allows you to work through it over a few weeks. And if you get to the end, you even earn yourself a special badge, and we all love little motivational badges. So all that's left for me to do is to thank our incredible guests, Shaz, Hannah, Aisling. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for talking about your experiences, because it can be difficult sometimes. I'm Leah Fullegar, and you've been listening to the Dementia Researcher Podcast. Goodbye.
Bye. The Dementia Researcher Podcast was brought to you by University College London with generous funding from the UK National Institute for Health Research, Alzheimer's Research UK, Alzheimer's Society, Alzheimer's Association, and Race Against Dementia. Please subscribe, leave us a review, and register on our website for full access to all our great resources. dementiaresearcher.nihr.ac.uk.